It's been 5 years since Julia, Thomas, and Louis faced the horror of the grim echo and barely escaped the cursed mansion. They tried to start a new life scattered in different cities, but memories of those events haunted them in nightmares. Thomas moved to the metropolis, got a job in a large company, and tried to forget himself in work. Louis, the oldest of them, settled in a quiet village, spending his days reading and gardening. Julia set out to travel the world, hoping that the distance would help her forget the horror she had experienced. However, despite their best efforts, their peace was disturbed. Strange disappearances started happening again in their hometown. Young people, tourists, and even locals went missing, accompanied by rumors of whispers in dark alleys and strange reflections in mirrors. The local newspaper was abuzz with headlines like "Mysterious Disappearances Continue." A voice from the past has returned. The town was sinking into an atmosphere of fear and distrust. One night, Julia, staying in a small hotel on the outskirts of Paris, received a mysterious letter with no return address. The envelope was made of antique paper, and inside was a faded photograph of a mirror from the very same mansion. On the back of the photo was written, "There is no escape from the reflection." Her heart pounded faster. A chill ran down her spine. How was this possible? Who would know about the mirror? Julia tried to contact Thomas, but his number wasn't available. So she decided to write him an email describing the situation in detail. Soon she received a reply. Thomas had also received a similar message, but with a different message. "The shadows are coming back for you." They realized it was no coincidence. Gathering their courage, they decided to return to their hometown and figure out what was going on. Louis, after receiving the call from Julia, was silent for a long time and then quietly said, "I knew this day would come." Meeting in a town had already seemed foreign and hostile to them, the friends went to the local archives. Dusty shelves, creaking floors, and faint light created a gloomy atmosphere. They immersed themselves in old documents, newspapers, and diaries, trying to find any clue. Finally, they managed to uncover the history of the Morty family who owned the mansion in the 19th century. The Morty family was known for their interest in the occult sciences. The head of the family, Victor Morday, was obsessed with the idea of immortality and communication with other worlds. He believed that mirrors were portals to other dimensions. In one of his diaries, they found an entry, "A mirror of the soul will open the way, but there is a price to pay for everything." Further entries became increasingly rambling, mentioning an entity that responded to their call, but proved to be uncontrollable. The family disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and the mansion was abandoned. The friends stood in front of the mansion, which seemed even more sinister than they remembered. The sky was draped in heavy clouds, the wind howling as if warning them of danger. As they stepped inside, they felt the coldness penetrate their very hearts. The walls were covered in black mold. There was a strange rustling sound coming from under the floorboards, and mirrors hung everywhere. But the strangest thing was that every time they looked in the mirror, they saw not their reflection, but their deepest fears, childhood nightmares, lost opportunities, guilt. Julia saw herself as a little girl lost in the woods. Thomas saw his father, long gone, reproaching him for past mistakes. Louis saw the image of his late wife calling him to her. They realized that the house was feeding on their fears and regrets. As they traveled deeper and deeper, they found that the corridors led to the wrong places. Doors they had just passed through were disappearing or leading to other rooms. The sounds of footsteps, whispers, and laughter echoed everywhere. Suddenly Louis stopped. "Do you hear that?" he asked. But before they could answer, he disappeared, as if vanishing into thin air. Julia shouted his name, but only an echo in response. Panicking, she and Thomas tried to find him, but the house played tricks on them. Julia offered to go back, but Thomas noticed that the corridor they had come down now led to another place. "We have to stay together," he said, trying to reassure her, but the tension was building, and the fear was getting worse. Following the faint light, they found themselves in a large hall where stood a huge mirror in a carved frame. It emitted a strange glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. In the mirror they saw Louis. His eyes were empty and his face was pale. "Help me, ... double quotes," he whispered. But his voice sounded distant, like an echo in a tunnel. Suddenly, shadows began to stretch out of the mirror, wrapping around their legs and arms. Thomas tried to break free, but his strength was leaving him. Julia felt the coldness seeping into every cell of her body. Graham Echo appeared behind Louis, his eyes shining with a deadening light. "Your souls belong to me," he said in a voice that sounded like the cracking of broken glass. Julia remembered the words from Victor Morday's journal, "Only the sacrifice of a pure soul can stop the darkness." Realizing they had no other choice, she looked at Thomas and said quietly, "I'm sorry." Before he could do anything, she stepped forward and touched the mirror with her hand. A moment and she disappeared inside the shadows. Let go of Thomas, and the mirror began to crack, releasing a bright light. Grim Echo let out a piercing scream, dissolving along with the mirror. The house began to shake, the ceiling caving in. Thomas, gathering his last strength, ran out of the mansion, miraculously escaping death. Thomas and Louis met on the hill, watching the mansion sink underground as if it had never existed. They were silent, each immersed in their own thoughts. "She saved us," Louis finally said, his voice trembling. Thomas clenched his fists, feeling the pain and bitterness of loss. A few days later, trying to make sense of what had happened, Thomas was walking along the river bank. Suddenly, a shiny thing in the sand caught his attention. It was a shard of mirror. Julia's face flashed in it, and he heard a quiet whisper, "This is not the end, ... beware of reflections." He froze, then threw the shard into the river, hoping it would relieve him of the haunting horror. But in the back of his mind he knew that the darkness was still out there, and that Julia's sacrifice might have been in vain. Grim Echo could find a new way into this world, and then the fight would begin again.